Good morning. All right, there we go. That's good. That's helpful. If you have your Bibles, open up to Mark 13. We're going to be in Mark 13 for a little bit. So here we are, 2013. Some of you, during last year, weren't sure 2013 was going to come. Well, here we are, 2013, the beginning of a new year. And like many of you, I've been thinking about my New Year's resolutions. Anyone in here New Year's resolutions people? It's okay, you can admit it. It's nothing unchristian about having a New Year's resolution. It's okay. Seriously, you guys aren't New Year's resolution people? I need some help here. Okay, all right. Well, we're going to have to change the sermon a little bit. No, I think all of you, whether you have like in a list you've written down, the new year this time brings opportunity for us to think about things that we would want to do differently. The things about this year and thinking about last year, and this is just a time. It's one of those new year kind of things that happens in our lives. And so whether you formally did that, I'm guessing and I'm hoping at least that all of you had some level said, for this year there's some things that I want to do differently. For me, I have New Year's resolutions. One of mine is just personally, I want to do all that I can this year to introduce people to the goodness of Duck Dynasty. So if you have never watched Duck Dynasty, you need to get online to your computer, go online and go to, I think it's on A&E, A&E.com. So if you don't have cable, you're okay. You can go to A&E, and there's a beautiful show called Duck Dynasty, and it's amazing, and you need to watch it. It will change your life, seriously. It really will. I'm not kidding. And so I'm going to do what I can. I have an opportunity this morning to stand in front of you, and I'm so far, 13 days, I'm doing good. But I also have others, probably similar to yours. I want to be more healthy, right? I want to exercise more. I want to do some things to change, my health and those things. I think we all can see in our lives when we look back and say, okay, I want to do this different. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. I want to be better at my workplace. And then we get like 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, and we're like, what happened? I had these great intentions, and I thought something was going to change, and I wanted to do something, and then it got difficult, and here I am. I read something this week that was talking about most people, part of your New Year's resolution is you want to get into the gym and you want to start working out. And so this time of year, gym memberships see just this huge spike, right? Everyone's going in. Everyone has deals. Come join up. Sign for 12 months. They want you to sign for 12 months because they know that the average person doesn't make it, the average person doesn't make it more than 8 weeks. Something like 75% or something like that, I don't remember the exact number, drop out by 8 weeks. And they want you to sign up for a year because they want to make sure they get some money out of you, right? As they're trying to run a business and they know chances are you're not going to make it. Why? Because it's going to get hard, it's going to be difficult. And sometimes we have these great ideas of how we want things to be, and then things get hard and it's like, wow. We fall away or we stop or something happens. You guys feel some of that in your own life? I think it's true for all of us. We have good intentions of wanting to do things. So let's look at our text this morning. Hopefully we will help us understand why we have this struggle in our lives. And then thinking about spiritual things. Maybe part of your New Year's resolutions this year was, I want to be a more godly father, a more godly husband. I want to read the Bible more. I want to share the gospel more. And sometimes we have, these just great things that we want to do, and life gets hard, and I'm not sure we understand what the consequences are going to be if we don't do those things. And we just have this struggle, this inner struggle that's happening. I hope our text this morning will encourage us to be faithful in living out our spiritual lives and living out this purpose that God has given us. So Mark chapter 13, starting in verse 1. And as he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." And Jesus said to him, Do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Now I'm just trying to imagine this in my head, how this is playing out, right? Jesus goes into the temple with some of his disciples, and they're on their way out, and they just look at the temple, and they're like, man, this is so amazing, Jesus. Look at this building. Look how incredible things are. Look at how things are going with us right now, and look at this temple. Look man, this is awesome. And then, in typical Jesus fashion, he takes their comment or their perspective, and he just turns it on its head. He's like, oh yeah, that's really good, but you know what's going to happen? This thing's going to be turned upside down and totally demolished. I mean, you don't think the disciples were like, whoa. I mean, we were just talking about how great this thing looks, and Jesus is like, yeah, and this is what's going to happen. And then you can see their wheels start to spinning. So we pick it up in verse 3. You can tell by their response that, what Jesus says something, and they're not sure what to do with this. So verse 3, they go across kind of this valley to the other side of the Mount of Olives opposite the temple. So it kind of gives this picture. They're looking back at the temple and thinking about what Jesus just said. Peter, James, and John and Andrew take him aside, ask him privately, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when all these things are about to be accomplished? So Jesus tells them, I'm going to turn this temple upside down. I'm going to destroy this thing. And their wheels start turning, and what they think, they have these two questions. Jesus, when is this going to happen? And how are we going to know it's happening? See, they're remembering what they're hoping Jesus is going to be. Flip over to the end of Malachi, the end of the Old Testament, last book in the Old Testament, the last thing that we read in the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 4. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and all evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. You shall go out leaping like calves from the stall, and you shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet. On the day when I act, says the Lord of hosts, remember the law of my servant Moses, the statutes and the rules that I commanded him at Horeb for all Israel. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. And then you have silence, several hundred years of silence. God no longer speaking to his people. And then Jesus shows up on the scene. And there's this guy named Jesus walking around and doing miracles and telling people that he is the Messiah. And so now these disciples are walking with Jesus, and they believe this is the one they've been waiting for. And so he makes a statement like, I'm going to turn this upside down. And what they're saying, what they're understanding Jesus to say is, I am who you thought I was going to be. And I'm coming to do this thing, and it's about to happen. And they're like, man, okay, Jesus, we're ready. We've been waiting. Our people have been waiting. We've been hearing that you're going to come. But we know this is their heart, because when you remember after Jesus, when Jesus dies and he resurrects and he's on the road, and he meets the guys that don't know it's Jesus. There are several of his followers that are walking down the road, and they're talking about, what's happening. And this guy comes up to them, and they don't know it's Jesus, but Jesus knows what they're talking about. And they're having this discussion. And he's like, what's going on? He said, well, we were following this guy, Jesus, who we thought was the Messiah. We thought he was going to change this thing. We thought he was going to usher in the kingdom. And they make this statement that said, we hoped he was going to be the one who was going to redeem Israel. So Jesus speaking to them and says this, and they think, man, this is who we hoped it was going to be. This is Jesus. Jesus, tell us, when are you going to do it? We're ready. When are you going to do this thing? And then he starts in verse 5, and we're not going to read all of this, but he goes into this big, long deal answering the second question. What will be the signs that these things are going to coming? And basically the gist of this section is, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. It's coming. You will know it's coming because things are going to happen that are going to be, it's going to be difficult to keep following me. He talks about several things in there about rumors of wars, and brothers will be delivered over to death, and the father his child, children will raise against parents. He's saying it's going to be hard. You're going to be taking in front of councils. It's going to be difficult. And then you get to verse 24, and he says, in those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaking, and they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. And you read chapter 13, and if you're like me, you're like, what in the world does some of this mean? Wars and rumors of wars and brothers over brothers and abomination and desolation. What in the world? And I think it's funny, at least it's funny to me. This account is in 3 of the 4 Gospels. And in all 3 of those accounts, there is no response from the disciples. I think that's pretty funny. Because I think they're sitting there listening to Jesus and they're going, oh my goodness, what is he talking about? What in the world is he talking about? I think most of us, when we think about Jesus' come, we have Jesus' return, Jesus' coming for them. Think about their perspective. Jesus hasn't died yet. And Jesus hasn't done anything yet except live this perfect life and tell them who he's going to be. We have the perspective of looking back and seeing what Jesus did in conquering death and the grave, but they haven't seen that yet. All their hope is on what they're hoping this guy's going to be. And Jesus tells them this whole deal, and they're like, what in the world? And then you and I pick it up and read it today, and if you're like me, you're like trying to figure this thing out, and what does he mean by all of these things? And then he gets to verse 32. He says, let's read 32 to 37. But concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son of Man, but only the Father. Be on guard, keep awake, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his own work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore, stay awake. For you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening or at midnight or when the cock crows or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. So Jesus tells them this whole thing, answering their second question. This is what it's kind of look like. This is what you can expect. And I'm sure Jesus sees in their face, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not really sure. I'm hopeful, but I don't know. And then in this part, he closes with 2 truths that he really wants them to get to understand. And then he's going to give them this admonition, this encouragement on how they need to live. He says, but concerning that day or an hour, no one knows. So concerning your first question, when is it going to happen? I don't know. Only the Father knows. He's telling them, you don't know when this is going to happen. You don't know when this is going to happen, when it's going to take place. I think about where we stand on this side. Thinking about what Jesus was saying. Yes, he's going to usher in this kingdom. He is going to redeem Israel. And we see this happen. And now we stand on the other side waiting for it to fully happen. We don't know. No one knows when Jesus is coming back. Not Harold Camping, not the Mayans, not the crazy comet people, if you remember those people, right, waiting for Jesus to come on the comet. No, no one knows when Jesus, that's what he wants them to know. The answer to your question is, I don't know. Now, I'm going to be honest here. Don't ask me to explain how God the Father knows something and Jesus doesn't know something. I don't know. That's just something that the Father, how he works here in this moment, in this life with the disciples. Jesus says, I don't know, but it's going to happen. He says, we don't know when it's coming. It could be today. It could be tomorrow. It could be another 1,000,000 years. That's what he says in the end there in verse 35 when he says evening, midnight, when the cock crows, or in the morning. It can happen any time of day. You don't know when it's going to happen. You can read chapter 13, Mark 13. You can read Daniel. You can read Revelation. And we should. We should be seeing the whole first section here. Jesus says, look, pay attention to these things. We have a Revelation class that we're offering. It would be great if you want to jump into that and start seeing these things. But Jesus says, but number 32, but concerning that time, we don't know for sure when it's actually going to happen. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking. But you can try all you want to figure it out, and the truth is you're not going to figure it out. And then he tells them, implied in here is the other truth that it is going to happen. He says there in verse 33, 35, and 36, he says, it will come. Be on guard, keep awake, for you do not know when that time will come. Verse 35, for you do not know when the master of the house will come. Verse 36, lest he come suddenly. In verse 32 and 33, that day, that hour, that time, what he wanted his disciples to know and what he wants us to know. And the reality and the truth is that Jesus is coming back. So just because we don't know when it is, don't get confused. Because Jesus is coming back. What he's telling them is, I am the Messiah. I am the one who is going to come to redeem Israel. You can believe that. He wants them to know he is everything that he said he is. He is the Messiah. He is the King. And he is coming back to reign forever. So we live in this yet but not yet tension, right? We see that Jesus has come. And he has made a way for salvation. But now you and I, just like the disciples in the first place, looking for Jesus' first coming, now we live on the other side, waiting for Jesus' second coming. And the truth, just like for the disciples, is the same for us. Jesus is the King. He is the Messiah. And you can rest assured and know beyond a shadow of a doubt this morning that the King is coming back to redeem his people. Jesus is the Messiah. Just like he had been predicted about forever. Jesus is the one who's going to redeem his people. Jesus is the one who's going to make all things right. Jesus is who he said he was. He's the King. He's the Messiah. And he wants the disciples to know that. Yes, it's going to get hard, and you don't know when the end is coming, but trust me, it's coming. And he wants them to know these two truths. And I know we're sticking here kind of on a knowledge side because of what he's trying to teach them. He's trying to change their heart. Because if we change our heart and really believe something, the consequences of something, then it affects the way we live our life. He wants them to grab these truths because he wants it to affect the way they're going to live. And so he gives them this urging, and he says, in summing up this whole chapter, if you're going to sum up Mark 13, what he wants them to know is to watch and be ready. It's really interesting. The whole kind of first section, he uses that, but be on your guard, watch and see these things. What he's telling them is, yes, you need to see, you need to watch and see these things. And then he gets into verse 34. Verse 33, be on guard and keep awake. What he wants them to know is that this is a reality and it's going to happen, and it ought to affect your life. You ought to live every day believing and thinking that Jesus could come back at any moment. Because I'm not so sure we really believe that Jesus could come back. Most of us think we're going to live to the life expectancy of 72 or whatever it is. And Jesus wants them to know that he is going to return. And this is so important. Why does he want them to know he's coming back? Why is he telling them this? Because he wants to give them a sort of warning here. That little part in 34, 33, be on guard and keep awake. He's saying, you need to pay attention to this. Because if you don't, it's not going to be good for you. I'm coming. The King is coming and you need to be ready. And if you're not, it's not going to be good. In verse 13, he says, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Why is Jesus imploring them and begging them to be ready, to be on guard, to be watching? What he's saying is, live your life with a readiness so that you can endure to the end and be saved. It's going to be hard. You're going to want to quit. You're going to want to give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Because if you give up, the warning here is you haven't endured to the end, and only those who endure to the end will be saved. Jesus is for us. Jesus wants us to endure to the end, and the only way that we're going to endure to the end is if we fix our eyes on him, knowing that he is our ultimate example. Jesus can say this to him because Jesus is going to be faithful all the way to the end. God gives him a purpose to come and live on this life, and I fully believe Jesus fully God and fully man. And Jesus has the temptation. He gets near the end and he sees that things are going to be hard. The end of Jesus' life, if you read in the Gospels, is not easy, right? Beaten, flogged, abandoned, hung on a cross. If anybody has a reason to stop, if anybody has a reason to quit, it's Jesus. And Jesus endures to the end. He's faithful. And why that's so important is because he understands you and me. Jesus says, I understand there's going to be times where you're going to want to quit. You're going to want to give up. Persecution is going to be too hard. If you want to raise your kids in godliness and they're not responding, and you're going to want to take the easy way out, and you just want to give up. You got people that you want to share the gospel with and it's hard and you're just going to want to quit and give up. Living this life of faith following Christ. See, Jesus has given us a purpose. God gave us a purpose. You are the salt and the light. It's our duty now that God has saved us. God didn't just save us and take us home. He saved us to leave us here for however long he's going to leave us here so that we would be the salt and the light to the earth. We have a purpose. That's the point of the illustration. Verse 34, it's like a man going on a journey. When he leaves home and puts his servant in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. We have work to do. And we need to be diligent. We need to stay awake. We need to live in the reality that Jesus could come back at any moment. And if we don't endure, if we don't be faithful in the things that God has asked us to do, the warning is that you cannot be confident that you've endured to the end for salvation. Now, I'm not saying you can lose your salvation. That's a whole nother argument or a whole nother discussion. But there's certainly the warning all through the New Testament. The ones who will be saved are the ones who have endured to the end. If you really believe in Christ, if you really believe that God has called you to this, saved you for a purpose, and you will live this purpose out, then you will endure to the end. Because Jesus will help us endure to the end. He's given them this warning because Jesus is for us. Jesus wants us to endure to the end. He wants us to be faithful. These two truths that he's telling us, we don't know when Jesus is coming, but Jesus is coming, and he wants them to know that to motivate them to live a life of faithfulness every single day. So how do we respond? How do you respond? Well, the assumption in the text is that you are already awake. And the truth is, some of you aren't awake. And you need to wake up to the reality that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the King. He is the one who loves you and wants to save you. And He could come back and redeem His people at any moment. And if you're not in the people of God, if you've not placed your faith and your trust in Him, you have not endured to the end for salvation, you won't be saved. Some of you need to wake up. You need to see the beauty of Jesus Christ. You need to see that He really is the Messiah. You need to place your faith in Him. You need to give Him your life, that He might give you this new purpose. And for some of you, you need to live with urgency in your faith life, in your faith walk. We need to live with the reality that Jesus could come back today. Jesus could come tomorrow. If Jesus comes tomorrow, are you confident in your life that you could look at Him and say, I'm not perfect, but God, I've tried to be faithful? Are there any areas of your life where you've quit on God? We got to live with urgency. God's given us a purpose. God's given us a task and the way He wants to live our lives. And the truth is He could come back at any moment and be over, and He's going to ask us, how's it going? What are you doing? And I know for me, I want to live my life with an urgency that really, really deep down with all of who I am believes that Jesus could come back at any moment. But that's going to affect you. You got to quit being complacent, quit being lethargic, quit procrastinating in your faith. Well, I'll tell that person about the gospel tomorrow. There may be no tomorrow. I'll start reading my Bible tomorrow. There may be no tomorrow. Well, I'll start serving in the church when things get better in my life. There may be no next month. God's asked us to be faithful, and He's calling us to be faithful now because He wants to use us. So how will you respond to this truth? Will you live with urgency in your life? What I'm not saying, just to clarify, students, I'm not telling you that you need to drop out of school, all right? Tim said today could be the day, so I want to go see the world or whatever. I'm not telling you to go do something drastic unless God is telling you to do something drastic. What I'm telling us, what I think Jesus is telling us is, I've called you to a way to live your life, to be faithful and obedient to me. And I want you to do that every single day with an urgency that believes that I could come back at any moment. And you're going to be held accountable for the life that you've lived in your faith. It's going to be hard. It's not always easy. You're going to want to quit. You're going to want to give up. Don't quit. Fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of your faith, the great example who endured the cross for our shame. I think about collectively in here as a church. You know, Kevin gave us last week, if you were here, this idea that we're in this together. Think about how incredible it would be if Southside Baptist Church decided to live every single day with an urgency that Jesus could come back. That's going to change how we live together. Relationships that need to be restored in this place. Stop waiting. Husbands that need to love their children and live in godliness with their wives. Stop waiting. We don't have time to wait. Just like the disciples, it can be so easy. We've been waiting and Jesus hasn't come. We've been waiting and Jesus hasn't come. Jesus wants to implant the reality in us, and you have to believe that the Word of God is true. Jesus could come at any moment. So how are you going to respond this morning? Are there some areas of your life this morning that you need to respond to Jesus and say, God, I've been tempted to quit in this area. Or maybe you have. Maybe some of you honestly are struggling with just your faith in general, and you're like, I'm not so sure I want to keep doing this. I'm not so sure I want to keep following Jesus. It's hard. My family's turned on me. People in my work don't understand. Don't quit. Fight the good fight. Run the race.